So, in my role as social media manager for STEMosphere, one of my main objectives was to create interesting and creative content that addressed relevant issues today while also adding in that element of science communication. And the way that I did that was creating infographics such as this one to really address political changes or celebrity quotes or other things that would draw attention to the infographic. So this first one, called Pollution Clean Water Act and Definition of Waters of the United States, was an examination of the difference in Clean Water Act regulations imposed in 2019 under the Trump administration. So each block of this infographic kind of addresses a different facet of this issue. So this first one is taking a look at how federal regulations increased in 2015 and decreased then in 2019. And the great thing about this infographic software is that I've embedded clickable links, so we can see here in 2015. So it shows the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System and its regulatory history. Going back, we can also click on the 2019 link. So this shows how Navigable Waters Protection Rule was changed to redefine what waters of the United States means. And so with that, I felt it was important to highlight a key term, which was ephemeral streams. Again, this involves a clickable link that takes you to an EPA study about how these ephemeral streams have impacts, especially in the American Southwest. The idea with embedding these links was to create a still simplistic infographic, but also for people that are interested, they can click to see what else is there. This next section was interactive graph about different sources of pollution. The great thing about this as well is that you can check or uncheck certain components, so we can take a look and see without unknown and unspecified how the different percentages change and what makes up those sources of pollution. And down here I wanted to keep it with the current events and bring in quotes from relevant experts. So we have from one side a US EPA administrator who discusses how changes to the Clean Water Act really have not had many impacts due to state regulations. However, a conservationist talks about how, in fact, these federal regulations have large impacts, especially in the American Southwest. Finally, this last section just kind of explains how states and other organizations go about their business based on whether a specific water is a water of the U.S. So I wanted to clarify here that the rollbacks to the Clean Water Act did not necessarily mean that there were no protections whatsoever. Instead, they were simply changed. If a water is a water of the U.S., you have to obtain a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, which is explained further here. And if it is not a water of the U.S., you must abide by state regulations for point source pollution. So this site also explains that. And then down here in my sources, I have created links to the STEMosphere Facebook and Instagram pages, as well as information about my sources here. The next infographic I created was to address recent issues with the coronavirus, but also it was initially spurred by comments made by Joaquin Phoenix during his Oscar speech. Here I addressed how veganism, COVID-19, and a struggling industry all play into the dynamics of milk production and dairy in the United States. This main section here talks about different news headlines, so things about dumped milk, dairy farmers, and each of these takes you directly to those sites. So information from the New York Times, the World Economic Forum, and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. This second section just kind of creates a visual image for how sales have been affected even before the coronavirus hit. This article here talks about how Dean Foods, which is a large dairy conglomerate, and how their bankruptcy already set the tone for some issues that were only heightened with coronavirus. Then this section here is a link to Joaquin Phoenix's entire Oscar speech, in which he spoke out against using cow's milk as a practice. And so this next section then goes off of that and talks about how there have been a wide range of different alternatives for cow milk that have grown popular, especially today. This last section here goes through the dairy supply chain to kind of address in a very visual and easy to understand way why there have been so many issues with the dairy supply chain now during the coronavirus. It seems, especially in the public, that there is this disconnect between why farmers are forced to dump milk when there are restrictions imposed on buying in the supermarket. And it's really all due to these central two steps of packaging and shipping, and how packaging that goes to restaurants has been stopped, and the type of packaging for school lunch milk has been stopped. And it's incredibly expensive to then have to switch over to the production for grocery stores. And then finally, these are some sources, and again, everything is linked back to the Latham Science pages so that anyone who is interested can go back and view those. From an aesthetic standpoint, my goals with these infographics was to really create something that was easy to understand, easy to read, and most importantly, relevant, so that people would want to share them, talk about them, and really gain more of a scientific understanding and just be more informed, because everyone likes to talk about and share what's going on with these issues. And I felt that it was, as a young person, very difficult to find unbiased, informative, and engaging sources for many of the topics that I was interested in. So this project for me was really an attempt to fill that gap in our world today.